What's up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com, or, of course, if you are watching on our YouTube channel, that's Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner, joining me as he always does for another episode of the UNC Basketball Show. It's our very own publisher, Andrew Jones, and AJ, we're here to talk about a plethora of things surrounding the UNC basketball program. We're recording this on Wednesday evening. You like that word right there, plethora. Recording this podcast on Wednesday evening. Yeah, it is. It's a hell of a word. Recording this podcast.
Apropos for this topic.
Yeah, exactly. We're recording this podcast on Wednesday evening. Tar Heels obviously losing to UVA on Tuesday night, 65-58. I haven't really had a chance to talk to you about it because you and Brandon did the three things. So we'll obviously hit on a little bit of that game before we move on to some topics from that game. Armando Bacot, Pete Nance as well. So some injury situations following there. And then towards the end, we'll kind of look ahead a little bit to Louisville and BC, the next two games coming up. So exciting show ahead as always. But I want to talk about UVA with the loss. Carolina dropping to 11-6, 3-3. Haven't won in Charlottesville for over 10 years. But obviously Armando Bacot playing like a minute and a half before he got out, was injured, did not come back. A tweet was put out by Jeff Goodman earlier on Wednesday. It said X-rays came back negative, no timetable on his return as of right now. So I guess that is a positive for the program. And I know you obviously had a conversation, saw Armando last night as well, so you can give us some insight on that. So just your takeaways from being at the game. It was a game in which it was kind of wild because you're looking at the lineup they're out there with, and you're like, out of any lineup that would beat UVA in Charlottesville or be up by 10 points in Charlottesville over the last 10 years, which hadn't happened in forever, I guarantee you that, it would be this lineup. And then things completely flipped in the second half and UVA ended up winning pretty comfortably. So what were your just takeaways from the game, and what insight can you give us on Pete Nance and Armando Bacot's injury situation? Because like I said, I know you were in the locker room, were able to even chat with a couple of those guys as well.
Where do you want me to go first? Because one goes in one direction, the other goes in another.
Well, let's talk about the game first. I want your reactions from the game.
Well, there's two ways to look at that too, because I think that there is a positive component and then there's a negative component to last night. The positive component is, hey, Jalen Washington's got skills and he's got a lot of potential, and he played 27 minutes last night, which was 7 more than he had played combined coming in. He's got some skills. He already has a beautiful baseline.
It's an old school game, isn't it? He's got like an old school kind of game.
Well, yeah, he had that move around Shedrick where he kept his pivot foot.
Yeah.
And it was sort of the stutter, 4 or 5 stutter step where he was able to wrap around Shedrick and score and draw the foul. And I was like, man, that's an old man play there for an athletic kid. Mm-hmm. So you have a really athletic kid who knows he can rely on his finesse and athletic ability, making an old man play. So to me, that was a noggin play. Old man plays are noggin plays. And so I like some of the instincts that he showed. I like the fact that you can just envision 2 years from now all the different things he's going to do. I talked to some people when I was driving back from Charlottesville this morning, and why is he shooting threes from the top of the key? I said, well, you have to understand his game. You got to listen to what Hubert's been saying for 4 months. That's what they think he could be. Hubert already thinks he's a terrific outside shooter. I watch him shooting in warmups. Pretty good outside shooter. That doesn't always translate to games, but if it's part of his game and it's been his repertoire before, you don't want to take that away from it now. If they're not going to guard him at the top of the key, well, then he needs to take that shot. If he sinks it, then shame on them for not guarding him. Imagine what happens if he sinks it, and then they got to come out and guard him. He had a ton of success getting by Shedrick. He had a lot less success getting by Vanderplas. And I think there was a wonderful lesson there. There was a ton of value for Jalen in his performance last night. I also think there was a lot of value for the team. The other kids now know that they could probably trust him a little bit more in a situation like that. I thought he gave them a lot of energy when he came in and scored 12 of their last 22 points in the first half, which, by the way, those 22 points were scored by guys not named Bacot, Nance, Davis, and Love. Mm-hmm. Which, think about that. And they were ahead, which that's part of the positive. The fact they weren't getting stuff from those other guys. One didn't play, one barely played. And Caleb wasn't getting shots off for a while. And RJ was having a tough time getting shots off. And those other guys stepped up and did something. So for the team that whose coach doesn't play the bench, it's 3 straight games where someone from the bench has netted a career high. And they are getting something from the bench. A lot of times it's situationally, Jacob. Last night it was just en masse.
Yeah.
Because he had to play guys. Mm-hmm. That lineup they had one time where I believe it was McCoy at the 5.
Yeah.
Leaky at the 4. No, I ain't Leaky at the 4. McCoy at the 5, Puff at the 4, and Nickel at the 3.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, they had some weird lineups, man. That's some weird lineups.
Okay. What's the over-under on the number of minutes those guys have spent together in practice, in game situation work? Probably not a whole lot. So I think that there were a lot of positives in that they were in the game and had to ride those guys. Here's the problem, though. The bench outscored UVA's bench 19-6 in the first half, and it was UVA 22-1 in the second half. So one guy made adjustments. I'm not saying Hubert didn't make adjustments. There really weren't any other options.
Yeah.
When Bennett countered with Vanderplas on Jalen, what was Hubert going to do? Mm-hmm. His big men were in warm-ups, not playing, or in street clothes. One of them, I guess, I didn't think Shaver even made the trip. I'm not sure if I remember seeing him. Doesn't matter. So he went with McCoy. So McCoy, I thought, played well in the first half, struggled in the second half. Vanderplas a little bit quicker. I think McCoy's a guy that at UVA, they could sort of hide him at the 5 sometimes because the way they play defense with the pack line, they double a lot in the post. They have to hide him some there. And remember, Jack Salt was the starting center on their national championship team. Mm-hmm. So they don't have to get a ton out of the center position at the 5 spot in order to be really, really good. He comes to Carolina, there's a lot more responsibility for the 5. So I don't think he meshes as well as a 5 at UNC as he did at UVA. He's certainly more of a 4. And I thought when he was playing the 4 he did some good things last night. He had 6 rebounds. And he had a big bucket late in the half, but he struggled as the 5 when Vanderplas was in there in the second half. And that was when that run started. And Hubert had to get Jalen back in there. Jalen gave the tired signal a couple of times, had to get him back in there, and the run continued that one time. It was the 23-6 run is what I'm talking about right here. And Jalen, I think he was tired. He admitted he was a little bit tired.
Yeah, how would he not be?
And just, they figured out a way to slow him down. And the problem there, and this is where the negative comes from, Jacob, is it shouldn't matter. With Leaky, RJ, and Caleb, you've got 10 years of UNC starting experience on the floor. That should be enough to win a game like that. Mm-hmm. It really should. And I wrote this in my column. You start looking at the guys that were – I thought it was really interesting the way Hubert sort of – he didn't pound it, but he smacked the official score sheet. They get a little score sheet, one printout, single printout. And, Roy used to fold it up and put it in his pocket when he was done. Hubert looks at it some right before he sits down. But he went and I'm going to say smacked it, but just patted it hard a couple of times to say the names in this box score should win. These are kids recruited to North Carolina. These are kids that are highly accomplished. Tyler Nichols, the all-time leading prep scorer in Virginia history. DeMarco Dunn was a scoring machine in college. Puff Johnson played 18 minutes and scored 11 points in the national championship game. Justin McCoy averaged 11.3 minutes a game on the ACC regular season champions 2 years ago. DeMarco Dunn, like I said, scoring machine in high school. There's Seth Trimble, big-time recruit, started the last 2 games, started the game last night defensively on Kihei Clark, who made the biggest pass in UVA history in 2019. Yeah. There's no reason for this North Carolina team to not win that game when you add Leaky, when you add RJ, when you add Caleb to the mix. And I think that that's where the disappointment for Carolina fans should be, is that they were in position for one of those guys to step up and say, okay, our big dude went down and we don't have Pete. So one or two of us need to step up. And if we're NBA players, we need to be NBA players tonight. And I think RJ played well. I think there were times where he shouldn't have been on the ball. Seth should have been on the ball so RJ can come off. If you have RJ and Caleb both trying to pop off screens and Seth just working to get them the ball, I think they're a lot harder to defend. But if RJ's on the ball and Seth's on one of the wings, Jacob, they weren't guarding him. Mm-mm. There were a couple of times he got the ball in the right corner, and UVA's like, meh. And he drove because he doesn't have confidence you have to shoot the ball from outside. You put Seth on the ball, put the other two in the wings because they're both really good catch and shoot guys, even though Caleb missed a bunch last night. And you're a little bit better offensively that way. Make Seth's mission to facilitate. But if he's in the corner playing the 2 guard or even a 3, he's not facilitating over there. And I just don't think that works much. So they had the parts to win the game. They had a 7-point lead in the second half. And the things that failed them, especially during that 23-6 run, were, as Hubert called it, the disciplines of the game. I mean, they didn't box out. You don't need Armando and Pete on the floor to box out. Defensively, they got blown by. You don't need Armando and Pete. You could say, okay, they have the rim protector there. Still getting burned, still getting beaten off the dribble. It never should happen. The loose balls that Hubert said UVA got to, the turnovers, the pick sixes. It's a 5-point game. Carolina's inbounding the ball with 24 seconds left, and Caleb does a bad pass inbound. Vanderplas steals it and dunks.
Yeah.
UVA had 4 dunks over the last 16 minutes of the game.
Mm-hmm.
They were basically, one was a putback slam. I think maybe 2 were putback slams, a couple were breakaways after turnovers. So they were in position to win the game. They didn't deliver. They're guards who aspire to play in the NBA. One of them talks about it more than the other. They weren't NBA guards in this game. They needed to be. There are really good Carolina teams in the past. I can throw some names out there if you want, but I'm going to go way back. There are nights where you need one of those future NBA guards to be an NBA guard that night. Kenny Smith at Clemson in 1987. Ty Lawson at Florida State in 2009. Wayne Ellington had a night where it may have been at Clemson as well. It's a big shot. There are times when a guy just has to step up and be a dude. And the 2 guards, one of them at least needed to be a dude last night. And again, I think RJ played okay. But Caleb went 24-13 without scoring. Now, to his credit, he had 4 assists during that span, Jacob. But he only took 5 shots. They've got to get him more quality looks during that period. I don't think people have a problem with Caleb shooting. I think they just have a problem sometimes with the shots that he takes.
Yeah, bad look.
And the rushed manner. Sometimes he takes a shot with 20 seconds on the shot clock. He can get with 5 seconds on the shot clock. Maybe it's more fluid that way, but you're not going to win a game like that if your so-called NBA guys don't play like NBA guys when your best player goes down right away. And I think that is the concern Carolina fans should have moving forward, because the dudes were not dudes when they needed to be dudes.
Yeah, I do agree. I think they have more than enough talent on that team to go up there. And it's it's a number 13 team, but it's not. I don't think UVA is that great personally. I really don't. I don't.
They're
think
good.
They're a good team, but I don't know if they're a top 15 team.
The sum of the parts carries more value than if you were to splice them up individually. So it's like if you sell a car for parts. Mm-hmm. If you were to sell UVA's team for parts, collectively you're not going to get as much as if you just sell the whole unit straight up. Mm-hmm. Because the sum of the parts it has more value because of the Tony Bennett factor. He's the best coach in the ACC.
Yeah, he's
regardless of what people think about the way they play, but he is. Mm-hmm. And that's why I thought Carolina was a more talented team last night. Should have won that game, even without Pete, even without Armando. That's disappointing. 17 games in, Caleb's slump continues, and I think it's affecting him some up here. And I've talked very positively about him this year, about how I thought that mentally he was in a better place, but he's struggling so much right now.
Yeah.
And he's only human, 21 years old. So they got to do something to jar that, because if that continues, I don't see them, turning into the right direction as quickly and sharply as they need anytime soon. They're 11-6, and this time a year ago, they were coming off the Miami loss in Coral Gables, and they were 12-5. And this team started a different launching point than last year's team did. And I know that there were obviously other factors a year ago, but I think people expected a lot more from this group. Mm-hmm. And they haven't delivered yet.
No, they haven't. And, for me, Caleb Love's probably been the most disappointing guy to watch on that team just for the majority of this year because of how inconsistent he's been. He can be such a good player, AJ. He can be absolutely fantastic. He can be the best guard in college basketball. And not even a game later, 5 minutes later, he could, go 20 minutes without hitting a shot. And I think those inconsistencies with him have kind of been a microcosm of this team in a lot of ways, because this team's been inconsistent. But the problem is, like you've said, is when you're down Armando Bacot and you're down Pete Nance, you don't really have that much forward depth down there. You have to rely even that much more on your guard play. When, Caleb Love, leading the ACC in scoring at one point, one of the best guards in college basketball on his day, goes 4 for 13. Like you said, doesn't score for 12 plus minutes in the game. And we've seen this over the last, few weeks in particular. He plays 36 minutes, plays more than anybody on the team. But I've talked to this with certain people, and I know certain Carolina fans will agree with. There's minutes that go by in the game when he is struggling that you're like, oh yeah, I kind of forgot Caleb Love was even out there. And this isn't me even trying to pick on Caleb Love or kick the guy when he's down. I just think the inconsistencies that he's shown this year in bigger games when they need a guy like him to step up, not being able to do that has really hurt this team, because I think RJ's been somewhat consistent for the most part. I think Leaky Black has had a really good season in terms of what some of the new, transformations in his game with shooting a little bit better from outside. He's such a good defender. But again, when one of your best players, if not your best player, according to some people, Armando Bacot's the guy for me, it's not even close. But when a guy like Caleb Love is struggling and is going through stretches during games where he's essentially hurting you more than he's helping you, that's just such a tough thing to overcome when you look at the other injury factors and really, the lack of experience and scoring production that Carolina's getting off its bench in the first place. I think until he turns it around a little bit, Carolina's going to continue to struggle, and his inconsistencies in a lot of ways are kind of mirroring North Carolina's inconsistencies, because he was great against Notre Dame, AJ. He had a really good game against Notre Dame, but he bounces back with another kind of poor performance, which we've seen a lot in the past few weeks. He's got to find a way to be more consistent and turn those things around sooner, rather than later, in my opinion.
He actually said the other day Armando's the best player, so he's publicly acknowledged that now.
I don't think anybody
really last night was the third time in 4 games he was at the 4-point mark. He had 4 points with 6 minutes left in the game.
Yeah, it's just it's hard for Carolina to win when one of your best players is doing that.
When that's part of your plan.
Yeah.
If part of your plan is for your pitcher to throw strikes and he's missing the strike zone, then your plan's not going to work.
Yeah, it's not going to work.
So, and the thing about it is what's so maddening for Hubert, and I think the challenge for Hubert, because I see people on social media, well, they just take him out, bench him. Well, here's the problem. With Caleb, that it's like that minute you sit him down, maybe that was the minute he goes off and hits 6 straight.
Yeah.
Because he's done it enough that there's got to be I've just got to let him be out there and let him be Caleb, because you know what you're dealing with. But when it's not going well, you've got to be able to find ways to work around that. And they don't do that very well. No. They did for a while last night, but that wasn't sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't sustainable. And I think it would have helped if they would have put Trimble on the ball. It'll be interesting to see if they do that at all moving forward. But Hubert has got to say to himself, man, if I take him out now, then he's going to hit a bunch of shots. He's going to go off. You think Philadelphia, you think second half against Duke and New Orleans, and you hit a couple shots like that. There was a little glimpse of shades of Philadelphia late. He scored 11 points in the last 7 minutes or something like that, and hit that 1-3. RJ was wide open in the corner, and Caleb's like, I'm going to fire this over 40 people, and the ball's going to come down with dew on top of it and somehow went through the basket.
Somehow goes in.
So it's the life of Caleb Love on a basketball court. Look, I like Caleb. I think Caleb's a good kid.
Yeah.
I think Caleb absolutely tries. The people that say he doesn't give effort, it's a narrative that it's low-hanging fruit crap that they are just don't feel like reaching for anything else. But he does give effort. Mm-hmm. But I do think there's a human nature factor where sometimes, the wheels and the mind are not always in sync. Mm-hmm. And then he goes in that period where he misses shots. He's missing a lot of shots right now. I don't know what he was for the field last night.
He was 4 for 13, 3 of 9 from 3.
Okay, so 4 for 13, which means he's 16 for 53 in their last 4 games.
Yeah, it's hard to win games when your guy's doing that. You know what I mean? It just is.
And it's hard. Talk to great baseball players when they're in slumps. Cal Ripken had 70 different stances.
Mm-hmm.
Because if he's in an 0 for 12, I got to tweak something.
Switch it up.
But you can't have 70 different forms your shot. I do think sometimes Caleb pulls back too quickly, and maybe gotta have a little bit more form. But that's the way he shoots. There's a little Seth Curry-ness there to it, but he's not Seth Curry, obviously. I'm going to say it now, and I'll keep saying it. He's due to break out. Yeah. He's due to have a 4 or 5 game stretch to make people say, there he is. And if he does that, they're going to win. They'll win each of those games.
Yeah, he's huge for them. Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. And again, I'm not trying to slight him at all. It's just, you look at him, 3-year starter, played a lot of basketball at North Carolina, played in a lot of big moments at this school. For him to just be struggling as much as he is and be as inconsistent as he has been for big parts of this season, it's no surprise that Carolina's sitting at 11-6, especially when you look on the 2 injuries I want to talk about real quickly to AJ.
Let's hit on. By the way, he knows this. We're not slighting him. He knows this stuff.
You can just look at him out on the court. I mean, he's not having a great time out there. There's no doubt. You can just look at his face when he's going through struggles. I mean,
the season is not going. The season is not going as he expected for the team and for him individually.
Yeah,
and it's weighing on him right now.
Mm-hmm. It is. It definitely is. You can, like I said, you can see it on his face. He wears it. He wears it for sure. And like you said, I think he's due for a breakout game. I think he will, and North Carolina needs him to. When you look at their kind of injury situation right now, Armando Bacot, like I said, X-rays have come back negative. That is a positive, but no timetable on his return as of right now. We are recording this, less than 24 hours after the game. Pete Nance still out, did not play last night. I know Hubert mentioned after the Notre Dame game that he expected Pete to practice leading into that game, but obviously was not healthy enough to play at all in that one. So AJ, I know you were able to talk to Pete in the locker room. We saw Armando leave the locker room on crutches, I believe, yesterday as well. So any updates you can give us kind of on those injury situations? Maybe, I know Armando's still up in the air, but when maybe you could expect Pete Nance to be back? You would think it'd be sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and maybe by the time we post this, I think my Pete Nance story will be up, but it's still wait and see with him. I watched him during warm-ups. He couldn't even bend over. He wasn't really doing much standing out there.
The back is tough.
Lower back is. This guy, he was never hurt. Never injured at Northwestern. And he had the hand injury back in November, and now he's got this. And I asked him about it last night, and he said, well, maybe this will be it. And he actually did the literal knock on wood.
I did the same, brother.
When he was sitting next to. It's been tough. And here's a guy who's trying to assimilate, and now suddenly, he's sidelined, but he's sidelined with something that could really slow a return. So the assimilation process is on hold. We'll have to restart, and there'll be a little bit of a different team when he restarts because they're getting other guys that might be earning more time. And I think Hubert's substitute situation, I think Jalen Washington's the kind of guy you don't need to be situational with. You just need to play him. There's no doubt about that, kind of like Trimble. But so it'll be interesting to see how Pete works back in, what the minutes will be like. But talking to him last night, he says he's working and trying to get the back right, which means it's just treatment. And sometimes you can do all the treatment in the world with lower back injury, and nothing other than time heals it.
And rest.
You could do the right things and not exacerbate. It was interesting. A couple of us were talking that it was kind of surprising he traveled. Because I'm pretty sure they knew that he wasn't going to play. The players told us Saturday they knew Friday he wasn't going to play. When Hubert says, it's going to be a game time decision. That's Hubert kind of goes with that line a lot. And traveling, and I know they flew back. They were trying to decide afterward whether they're going to bus or fly back, and they flew back. I just think all that traveling for a 6'11" guy on a plane with a lower back, I just think that was interesting. My thing is just sit him, let him rest, get that thing healed, and then come back. So I don't know. I would be surprised if he plays this weekend just because he didn't sound super optimistic like he's going to be playing in the next game last night. But he wasn't down. He's like, look, I got to do what I got to do. And he's a fairly upbeat, positive guy anyway. As far as Armando goes, we were talking to RJ in the locker room, and Armando's locker was next to his. It was in a corner. So there wasn't much room there. And Armando came in after he got out of the shower to change, and some of us had to scoot over a little bit, give him room to change. And I wasn't monitoring him because we were talking with RJ, so my focus was him. But Armando wasn't on crutches then. It appeared that he was okay in that sense. But I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't looking at the ankle. I don't know if there was anything on the ankle. I didn't bother looking because I wanted to make sure we got stuff from RJ because Hubert was getting ready to go to his presser. And yes, a colleague saw him on crutches. I did not see him on the crutches. A colleague did and tweeted that out. And that made a lot of sense. There was a lot of family there. And at that time, I was in the press room uploading the videos. So I didn't go out there to the tunnel and see him. But It makes sense. It's a precaution. You're going to be on crutches.
If anything,
you don't want to apply a lot of pressure. But he came out about 3 minutes into the second half in his warm-ups, and he was standing with the rest of the teammates and sitting and standing and sitting and clapping. I'll tell you, when guys were coming off the court, he was one of the first ones to go give him a little fist bump or whatever. So I would think that you could be cautiously optimistic about him, especially with the stuff that Jeff Goodman tweeted out earlier. Jeff's gonna get reliable sources on stuff like that. So, but would I be surprised if he plays Saturday? Yeah, I would, just because that was a real painful looking situation.
It was,
and he
man.
didn't. He's such a tough dude. We remember he had that terrible injury against Ohio State his freshman year.
Yeah.
And a couple of days later, they played UVA in Charlottesville, and I remember the big story was Armando running out of the tunnel to warm up.
Yeah.
And there he was. So even when he was still finding his maturity oats, he was still tough and went and played. And I think he grabbed like 10 boards or something that game. So if Armando can go, he'll go. But I wouldn't be surprised that neither one of them go at Louisville, which is a dangerous game with them, just because we know how this team sometimes looks at the standings, which they got to not do.
Play down the competition.
They're 0-4 in true road games, Jacob.
Mm-hmm.
They're 0-4 in true road games, and they're 2-8 or 2-6 in games away from, or 3-6 in games away from Chapel Hill. So Louisville's, if they're going to have a big crowd this year, they're going to have it Saturday.
Yeah, so, that's for sure. With the Tar Heels, no, they do not.
Yeah, and if Pete and Armando don't play, I would say just get out of there with a W. It'd be a good win for this team.
Yeah. Right? No doubt about it. And that's
shouldn't be that way. They should go in there and roll, because those guards need to be dudes, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt. If Carolina plays like it can, I mean, there's no doubt they'll beat Louisville, a Louisville team that just, for lack of a better word, just sucks, which we're going to hit on in a second. No disrespect to Louisville, but
they're really struggling.
Yeah.
They got a few players over there a lot of people wanted.
Yeah, they got some parts, but
it doesn't look organized to me. But I'll tell you what, to their credit, they beat Western Kentucky, which is not a bad team.
I know.
And then they were down big early against Wake this past weekend, and they made a game out of it. So they're not quitting. So credit Kenny Payne with that. They got Danny Manning on the staff over there. They got Nolan Smith on the staff. So they got some people that know what the hell they're doing over there. And they've got a few players. So Carolina better be ready to play. You cannot take anybody for granted on the road in this league, even this edition of Louisville. So the Tar Heels need to show up and be ready to go, regardless of who's in uniform Saturday.
Yeah, no doubt. We'll talk a little bit more about the matchups coming up in a second. I want to give a shout out to our sponsor on this podcast, Rogue Shop. You guys know we love them. Check them out at rogueshop.com. Specializing top shelf family grown hemp products, CBD, Delta 8, Delta 9, whatever form you like to consume it in, tinctures, oils, gummies, creams, flour, whatever you're looking for. They've got you covered. It's really, really good stuff, really high quality stuff, and made with a lot of TLC, as I like to call it. So make sure you check them out. Tar Heels 10 is the promo code to save on your order. Check them out, rogueshop.com. Links in the description below. Go get their high quality products. I know many people can vouch for the cream, including the person I'm talking to right now. It's absolutely fantastic stuff.
I need some right now. I'm out.
I hear you, man.
I'm out. Both shoulders are just brutal right now.
Gotta get you some, man. I know. My dad just bought a few little things of it about a month or so ago as well. So he's a big fan of it too. And if you've used any other products as well, they're really good. And I think the biggest thing to take away from it is they're just really, you can tell they're family grown, family made, really high quality as well. You know what's in it and you know where you're getting it from. So check them out, rogueshop.com, promo code Tar Heels 10 to save. Links in the description below. Real quickly before we wrap this one up, we just mentioned the Louisville game. That's this Saturday. I believe it's a 2 p.m. tip off, correct? I believe. Yeah, Louisville, for those who don't know, sitting at 2-14, 0-5 in conference play. Again, just a team that's really, really struggling this year. And then Boston College coming up after that at home next Tuesday. Boston College 8-8, 2-3 in conference play. So 2 very winnable games coming up. You'd expect, even despite some of the injuries, despite, kind of Carolina's struggles at times, you would expect them to go to Louisville and be able to win with the sum of the parts they have. Not guaranteed. We look at how this team's played at certain times this year. And then Boston College, a physical team, a team that I think is going to cause Carolina some more issues than some would think, especially if Armando Bacot and potentially Pete Nance don't play in that one. I think that could be a really, really tricky game for the Tar Heels. So, again, 2 very winnable games coming up, which I think is a positive. But as we've seen with this team with an eye on the A game, they can beat about anybody and they can lose to about anybody as well. So definitely 2 games that the Tar Heels need to be prepared for.
Yeah, it looks like Earl Grant's doing a decent job at BC.
Yeah.
BC had a lot of guys out early, so don't look at their overall record right now and take a whole lot from it. Quentin Post missed, I think, the first 13 games.
Mm-hmm.
Carolina doesn't have Nance or Armando. Quentin Post could cause some problems.
Yeah.
That'll be an issue for Jalen and McCoy and those guys. And I like Zachary, the guard. I think he's a gritty dude. I like dudes like that in the ACC. They've got some young kids with some bounce and some talent. They're not horrible. Now, they're not going to make the NCAA tournament, but they're not horrible, and they could certainly go in and beat Carolina on the road if the Tar Heels don't have the right mojo that night, and if the dudes aren't dudes. The 2 guards in the backcourt need to be dudes, right? And so I think that is a game that the Tar Heels would be in danger of having to struggle to win or possibly lose if they don't have the right mindset. And here we are 17 games into the junior season for a couple of guys, the senior season for a couple of guys, the 5th season for a couple of guys. And talk about the right mindset shouldn't be an issue. You think that this group's been humbled enough that right mindset shouldn't be an issue moving forward. They're too mature to have mindset issues going into games. They need to be able to police themselves. It can't just be Hubert pushing all the buttons for this game or that game, and they're up and then they're down. These guys want to be pros. They all talk about wanting to be pros. Well, to be a pro, you don't have to have a coach motivate you and rah-rah. You have to set your own standard of motivation and internal rah-rah. You have to carry that every day. Hubert is living proof of that. He'll tell you that his 12-year NBA career, the way he strung out 12 years was to be that guy, was to be totally spot on ready every moment. That's how he got a 12-year NBA career. Because unless you're a star, it's really hard. Or one amazing niche. And Hubert did have that as a shooter, but still, there are a lot of shooters. So Leaky fancies himself as a pro to some level. Caleb does, RJ does, Armando does, Nance does. Some of the other younger ones want to be that. Well, to me, readiness shouldn't be an issue moving forward. They're 11-6. They got 6 losses. They're the number 1 team in the country to start the season. They played the national title game last year. I don't care that 2 of the losses are in the state of Virginia with Armando playing a total of 78 seconds. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. This team needs to take care of business. I don't see anybody on their schedule that without Armando and Pete that they can't beat, with maybe the exception of Duke on the road. They should be able to beat all those other teams if they play good basketball, play the way they should play, but they don't do that very often. So I think the test moving forward, obviously I always look for readiness. And if the readiness continues to be a problem, then I'm less certain that this team's going to turn it. I thought they were going to turn it on, Jacob.
I did too.
I really did. And the injuries, you can't, maybe if the injuries don't occur, maybe they would have turned it on. Who knows? But they were healthy and blew a 9-point lead at Pitt. I know Pete got hurt earlier in that game, but he still finished it. He didn't play the last 4:48 more because of matchups and need, not because of the back. So this team has a lot to show. They really do. I mean, I've given them the benefit of the doubt for a lot of this year, but 17 games in and losing in the manner that they have lost too often, it's kind of hard to give them the benefit of the doubt right now. They have a lot of proving to do as individuals and collectively.
They do, no doubt, and we'll know more after this week, and you'll getting 2 wins under their belt against some lower level competition. The ACC could give them a little more confidence, but I do agree. I mean, I do agree with you. I really thought this is a team that had kind of turned a corner a couple different times this year already. And I know the injuries are unforeseen. You can't prepare for that in a lot of ways. I know they're big injuries with experience and just down at that forward position where they just don't have a lot of depth, especially with a guy like Will Shaver, who hadn't really played at all at North Carolina anyway, being out for the year. At least there's another body you could throw in there. They don't really have that luxury right now. But again, like I said, when you got Caleb Love struggling like he has, you've had inconsistent guard play, especially offensively, kind of for the whole season in a lot of ways, bearing a few games. It's a team that, 17 games in, like you said, I mean, you got to figure it out eventually. And I was talking to somebody about this too. I mean, Carolina keeps losing games like this or being this inconsistent team. We're going to have conversations about them even making the NCAA tournament. I mean, that's just the reality this team's going to be in before, it realizes it. I don't think it'll get to that point. I think this team has enough parts on it, like we've harped on all podcast, to avoid that even being an issue. But that's not the reality we're kind of living in right now. This is a team that just is struggling and is losing games at a lot more of a regularity than they expected to, and pretty much any Carolina fan and any college basketball fan in the country expect them to do as well. So a lot of improvements needed, AJ. A lot of improvements needed.
Yeah, there's another layer to that, Jacob. Greensboro is one of the 8 opening weekend sites.
Yeah.
And they're on the verge of playing themselves out of Greensboro. Because think about it. Who would be in Greensboro right now? Clemson and Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
Tennessee.
Who could have foreseen that one? Yeah.
So, yeah, the ACC tournaments, because we all know what happens when Carolina begins its tournament run in the state of North Carolina. It usually turns out really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
So, except in Charlotte a couple of years ago, they lost A&M. So, right now, the battle for Greensboro, you got to think maybe Tennessee. Louisville's a second weekend site. Mm-hmm. So I think Clemson and Virginia would be the 2 teams right now. Duke is in contention for it. So Carolina's resume is, to their credit, they've played the most Q1 games of anybody in the country, I believe. Mm-hmm. But they're not winning enough of these games. They're 0-4 in true road games. They lost 2 Q1 games on neutral sites. So you play a lot of Q1 games, but you got to win something.
If you're not winning them, what's the point? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's interesting. I think playing for Greensboro is important, but right now, that's not on the radar.
Greensboro. No, if they keep this up, there's no way they're going to Greensboro.
They have to get Caleb Love somewhat right, and they have to get Nance and Armando healthy, and they've got to figure out if there's going to be a fairly standard rotation at some point. Now that Hubert has seen what all the bench guys can do, he's got to get that figured out too. And I do believe that January is the month where the grit is fully formulated. And it's kind of hard. In part, you could do it when you're dealing with the adversity that they're facing right now, but it's also hard to do it when some of the guys aren't on the floor. Mm-hmm. So they have to get better in a lot of areas quickly over here in the next few weeks, because we're 3 weeks from February.
I know, it's crazy.
We're 8 weeks from Selection Sunday, less than 8 weeks. The tournament starts 8 weeks from today, maybe 9 weeks from today. So think about it. They're already 9 weeks into the season.
No, you got to get right, man.
They're past the halfway point. Mm-hmm. So they're losing opportunities to get this thing going.
Mm-hmm. They're struggling. They are, and like I said, I know injuries have played a factor, but this team's got enough parts and enough talent to be able to win some of these games that they've struggled in or haven't been able to. So we'll see what happens.
Mark.
Yeah, there's just a while. It's been a weird season, and we'll wrap this one up right now. But it's just been a weird season, and starting from where they started to where they're at now, the struggles that some of these players have had, the injuries that Armando Bacot's just not been able to stay healthy. Then Pete Nance's back gets tweaked, and before you know it, he's missing multiple games. Who knows when he's going to play again? So it's just there's a lot of things that were unforeseen going into this year. But again, I just don't think this Carolina team and individuals on this Carolina team have been consistent and or good enough for long periods of this season. Like you said, we're halfway in. It's not like we're just 6 games in and there's plenty of time to get those things figured out. If you're halfway in and still having consistency issues, that might just be who you are at this point. So we'll see what this team could do. But again,
I don't think we're quite there, Jacob, but I think we're a few weeks away from being able to maybe say stuff like that.
Yeah. It's not quite there yet.
This time a year ago, they were in the shaking the tree process, because remember Dawson, they had that week at Miami and Wake where they lost by 50 points and they gave up 92 points in the paint or something crazy like that. So last night would have been the Miami game a year ago. And then this Saturday would be the Wake game a year ago. And they've got to go to Louisville. So they were helped in the tree shaking process that Dawson left. Mm-hmm. And Anthony Harris was no longer available because he had his issues to deal with. So Hubert Tam was forced to give Brady 35 minutes a game, and it worked out. And they developed that chemistry, and they were mentally a much stronger team when they got through all that. Now there's a lot more parts. Mm-hmm. There's a lot more parts. The mission is there, but the individuals kind of view the basketball world a little bit differently than they did a year ago, which I think might be complicating matters some a little bit. So I think Hubert's job right now is tougher than it was this time a year ago, but I also think the other end of it could be more rewarding. And that's pretty significant given that they made a run to the title game last year. But I'm not talking just in March. I'm talking February. This team has a chance to be really good in February and win a lot of games and get themselves back in the conversation with Greensboro.
Yeah.
But a lot has to happen between that. A lot has to happen the next 3 weeks for them to become that team. And the clock ticks fast in college basketball. Once you get into conference play, it's like boom, game. Next thing you know, it's March. And who are you?
Yeah.
So
a lot of improvements needed, man. We'll see. There's still plenty of time for them to do. Well, not plenty of time. There's still time for them to do it, but like you said, time is taken away. And if they're going to turn it around and get this ship back on track, they need to do it sooner rather than later. So we'll see what happens, starting with Louisville and Boston College over the next week. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Another episode of the UNC Basketball Show. Appreciate you watching. Big shout out to the Rogue Shop, rogueshop.com, for continuing to sponsor. Links in the description below. Make sure you use that promo code TarHeels10 to save on your order, and make sure you keep it locked to TarHeelIllustrated.com for all your coverage of UNC football, basketball, and recruiting. Like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell as well so you know every single time we upload. We do upload a ton this time of year. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks.